Welcome to Jumpstart Your Joy. I'm your host, Paula Jenkins. I invite you to join me as we explore how inspiring people have chosen joy in their lives and what they have to share with us about how to jumpstart joy in the world. Plus, how do we follow our own hearts, find work that lights us up while mindfully noticing the role that joy plays in our own journey. Welcome to episode 65. This is Paula Jenkins, a life and career coach and the host of Jumpstart Your Joy. I am excited to have Rosie Williams on the show this week. She is the author of Repurposed Faith, Breathing New Life into Your Quiet Time, and I love that we get to chat about faith, digging in and making quiet time during a busy life. And she really shares some lovely thoughts about rekindling relationships and about a camper that she's refurbishing with her husband. First, I want to give you all a very warm welcome and say thank you for listening. If you want to follow along with this episode and grab the links that Rosie talks about, you can get the show notes for this episode over at the website at jumpstartyourjoy.com/episode 65. If you like what you hear and you want to subscribe, Jumpstart Your Joy is on all of the major podcasting syndication spots: iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Player FM, and Google Play Music. If you search for Jumpstart Your Joy, we will pop up, and if you subscribe, then you will get the weekly episodes delivered directly to your mobile device. If you're looking for ways to jumpstart your own joy, I have a free e-course on my website called You Plus Joy Unleashed. It's a week-long class that walks you through how to reacquaint yourself with joy in your life. I share exclusive journaling prompts, a bunch of fun freebies, and so much more, and you can sign up right on the homepage of jumpstartyourjoy.com. And now, without further ado, I bring to you the interview with Rosie Williams. So welcome to the podcast. Today we have Rosie Williams, author of Repurposed Faith. Thank you so much, Rosie, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Paula.
Would you like to tell us what you loved most as a child or in school? What were your early sparks of joy?
Early thoughts of joy. Well, when I think about that, one of the things that comes to mind was a time that my dad and I would spend occasionally taking a train ride from my hometown in Topeka, Kansas, to Kansas City on the train, while he would have a business trip or something like that. And I would be packing my dolls and playing and just enjoying this adventurous trip. I mean, you'd have thought I was going to New York City or something, but it was just a sweet memory with my dad, and that's something that sticks with me.
I love that. I remember very fondly packing up toys and like all of their accessories or whatever it was, and there's something very imaginative about that kind of that child's mind. I don't know, there's something very nostalgic about it for me as well. And also so wonderful that your dad would take you on these adventures. It's so neat when you get to spend special time with parents.
Yeah, and I really, as I've gotten older, have realized that not all children really have a really good childhood or lots of fond memories. And I feel very fortunate, very humbled to have had just a delightful childhood. And so I thank my parents for that.
And what is it? I mean, I know you've written this book, Repurposed Faith, Breathing New Life into Your Quiet Time, and I've read it, and it is amazing. What is it that you do now in addition to writing books?
Well, we just launched the book October the 21st here in 2016, and so since that time now, this is my first solo book. I've contributed some other works, but so I'm learning as I'm going. But it's exciting because I'm having an opportunity to share with different groups of people, different age groups. It's interesting because the underlying message is the same, whether I'm speaking to a group of young marrieds or to a group of seniors. The idea of trying to encourage people in their journey and in their faith walk, is the underlying message is the same. So I see myself, I'm going to be doing a little bit, some traveling and to speaking and that kind of thing, kind of regarding this book. And I see that kind of happening well into 2017. But I also have on my heart a series of children's books that are geared not only to military kids, but that's kind of my target group is military kids. And so I've written one of those, a little book called Sergeant Willie's Jeep. And so I'm hoping to be able to continue on with that project, and we might even add a little puppet show to that. My husband does puppets, and so we're kind of thinking of how we can bring that alive for children. So.
That sounds so charming. I love that. Because I know
it's my grandchildren. It's my grandchildren's fault. They inspire me, and they make me smile. And I think that that's also a good thing too, to be involved with children and the lightheartedness they bring to learning and those kinds of things. And so I'm hoping to be able to bring that vision I have for this little series of books to fruition.
I love it. I have a 6-year-old son, and there is something like reinvigorating about almost everything when you can re-see things through the eyes of a child. And I know, we first met because we were connected through, I think, a faith-based group on Facebook, and we're partnered up kind of randomly as, I think accountability partners. And
yeah.
And your dream.
That was kind of fun.
It was, yeah. And your dream at the time, I think, was around the children's book, at least at first. So I'm so excited to hear that Sergeant Willie is taking shape.
Yeah. Sergeant Willie, I think when we first met, Paula, one thing I remember talking about was your theme of Jumpstart Your Joy. And I had woken in the night one night. This was prior to even talking to you or knowing you. But I woke in the night with this thought of jumpstart your quiet time. And I couldn't go back to sleep. And so it was that night that I believe that God laid on my heart the idea and the vision for this little book that ended up coming out. And I got up and actually wrote out an outline of the 10 chapters of that book that night, and then I was able to go back to sleep. But I remember us talking about the whole idea of jump-starting things and how it just reminds me of how many times in our lives that we wear thin. Life sometimes throws us a curveball, or life events happen and people lose heart, and sometimes they lose faith. I know that my husband, he's a Vietnam veteran, and the guys that he served with at times would say things like, well, how come God went AWOL on me? Where was God when I needed him? And they had so much trauma and so much just grief in their experience that they couldn't imagine how come God would allow that to happen to them. That happens in life, and we have to look and encourage one another to say, God was there all the time, and sometimes he does allow things like that to happen, but he walks with us through that, and then we can get to the other side of the experience with our faith intact.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it is really hard because I think most people at some point in their life will go through something that is traumatic. And how is it that we get back in touch with God or whatever, if someone's, we're both of Christian faith, but if someone is not, whatever your sense of the universe or the creator or whatever that is, how do you reconnect with that source and kind of, sort through the thing that happened? I don't know if you have words around that.
I think that, of course, for me personally, the object of my meditation is Christ Jesus, and it's, through the Bible that he speaks in really powerful ways. One thing that does sadden me sometimes is when people, even other Christian people would even say, well, I know the Bible says this or that or something else, and then they'll finish the sentence, but you don't know what I've been through, or my life experience doesn't match up with a verse, let's say, that says that God will keep us in perfect peace if we keep our mind on him. And then there comes the tension then between the actual life experience and the promise that is in the Word. And so for me, one of the things that I did in the book was I looked at different obstacles that come in the way of people's faith. And one of those things is when life turns upside down on you. And I gave some examples of some friends of mine who had some traumatic life event, and they were people that were very steady in their faith through good times and bad times, people that I'd known for many, many years. And I observed as they went through those things and how they hung on for dear life, even through terrible grief, but just hung on, and how through that whole process that God brought them from a place of darkness, or maybe being in a pit, so to speak, and just lifted them up out and put them on solid ground again, and they were able to experience light and joy again in their life. And so I tried to put some stories in there, because I know when I'm reading a book, I like to read about somebody's real life adventure or story, and that kind of helps me too.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with spiritual and even the biblical stories, it's sometimes so hard to relate to things that seem like a long, long time ago. Actually, that's a lot of what this show is even about, is that there are those, as you said, pits and times in everybody's life when we kind of bottom out, or as Brene Brown would say, we're face down in the arena. And so what is it that gets us to come back up? And what is it that then jumpstarts, as you were saying, either your quiet time and your meditativeness and returning to what you know and what you know to be true? Or what is it that reminds you that there's something more than whatever this moment is?
Right.
I love how that runs as a theme for both of us too, because it's uncanny, but yet, I don't know, synchronicity is never entirely surprising, maybe, when you think of a creator and God that's in the mix all the time.
Yeah, it's there's certainly no easy answers, and I think that I know there's been times in my life where I probably have thrown out what seemed like little pat answers that I learned in Sunday school, and you learn these things, and then you kind of come through basically like a test of your faith, and it's during those times where, for me personally, it has been through reconnecting, taking time away by myself in a place that's quiet, in a place that I can actually meditate upon God and Christ and His Spirit that He's put within me, and ask Him to help me. Sometimes it's more than asking; it's crying out for help, because sometimes you're whatever it is that it is you're going through. That's all you can really do is say, "God, help me through this." And there are days, for me, this whole thing of a quiet time of meditation will look very different than another day. And I certainly, in my writing, to not make this some little like religious to-do thing that you just check off, but more of a relationship with the living God where He's loving and He's compassionate and kind. And one of the chapters, as I've talked to people that have read the book, one of the chapters that comes out as one of the ones people seem to be able to relate to the most is the one where I'm talking about relating to God as a loving Father, because a lot of people didn't have that experience growing up. I mean, I even talked to one girl. She said that when she thought of God, it was like His back was turned to her. It was just so interesting to me, because when I think of God, now, in light of the fact that I had a very tender, compassionate father, so when I think of God, I can crawl up on His lap. I can put my head on His shoulder. I can share my heart with Him and be comforted by Him. But if we haven't had that experience growing up, then that's much more difficult. And so that was a chapter that I treaded very humbly on, because I knew that I hadn't experienced that from a negative sense, and I really had to pray about that chapter, because I wanted to hold out to people what God really is like, because I think sometimes people walk away from God because they see Him as a stern taskmaster that's going to smack you down if you don't do the right things, and if you don't go to church, and if you don't do this and that. And instead of it being a loving Heavenly Father who wants us to come and be in His presence, He wants to help us. in very practical ways in whatever it is we're going through.
I think last time when we talked about it, like the image that hits me is the prodigal son, which if people don't know the story or if they've just heard that as like a saying, is really that idea that the one son leaves and goes out and has much merrymaking of who knows what sort and spends the family's spends his own inheritance, and the other one stays at home and is, I'll use air quotes around, the good son. But the father welcomes back the child that had left and squandered his funds, just as if he was the other son. I mean, there was no difference in the welcome, but it's because that father wants a relationship with every one of his children. And I've pared that down unbelievably. But the idea that... Well,
no, I think you did good with that.
Thank you.
Well, but like, it's just a matter of him taking the Bible even talks about how we're going to stumble. I mean, we're sinful people. But he, at the point that we ask for him to help us, he's going to take us and lift us back up on the pathway to himself. And so, that kind of love, I think, if I could pick out one thing that would draw somebody to Christ, would be if they could understand how very much he loves them and have that whole umbrella of love around their heart and their mind and their thoughts, because those are the kinds of things that are going to motivate us to draw into someone, is when you realize the amazing, unending love that he has for us, and that he wants to be able to give that to us so it can overflow into the lives of other people.
The difference between a God that is judging and might push you away at any moment versus a God that is just love, and that's all God is, and that there's an unending amount of welcome and hospitality and acceptance. It's a very different message than maybe what some of us have either been taught or perceive as being the possibility of the relationship that they might have with God. And I love that you're bringing that out, the piece about that it's love and that his arms are always open.
Right. Because of just the way life is, a lot of times, I know for me, and I shared this also in the book, but there was a time where I had gotten so busy, overloaded with life, and I began to pick up a lot of anger and a lot of bitterness over certain things that were happening in my life that I had no control over whatsoever, or that didn't turn out as if I had hoped or dreamed. And so when you see things like that kind of crashing to the ground, or you're hurt by people, maybe over and over, there's a response there. And sometimes if it's anger that's not dealt with and it turns into bitterness, then it starts breaking you down, and not only spiritually, but physically and emotionally. And for me, I had to learn how to regain my sense of a balance and peace and calm. And I think that in the world we live in, with all the technology, with all the pace of life, with just trying to pay the bills and keep things going in the family, I think that it's very difficult to take those times and to take care of ourselves, because we're going at such a pace that we don't even realize that we're empty, or that we're, weary, or that we're sick, or whatever, because we just are going, day after day after day, push and push. Then there's that time when your body says, you're not doing this to me anymore. And you find yourself, like the gal you mentioned, flat out on the highway, face down. I mean, and even in those times, and maybe sometimes, especially in those times when we've kind of come to the end of ourselves and the end of our own strength, and we do say, God, I need your help. And he reaches down through a song, maybe through a friend, maybe through a pastor, maybe through a personal verse of scripture that hits you personally like you've never read it before. Somehow he will meet us right there at the point of our need. And I think when that happens enough, that relationship begins to become stronger and stronger and stronger. But we do have to deal with the emotional and the physical, and make sure that all of that balances out.
I've found that it's very interesting that once you're kind of in tune and open to getting a message, that they show up all over the place, right? Like, but like what you're saying is you have to make space for it and make it something that your heart is open to, so that you can hear and receive whatever the inspiration is.
I mean, it happens in unexpected ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I shared the story of how I was driving my son, and it had been one of those weeks where school closed down because the water main broke, and I was having to drive him pretty far to take him to a different daycare. And, it was like one of those very, in hindsight, not that stressful, but in the moment seemed very stressful. And on the freeway, a piece of paper blew into the grill of my car. And when I got out at the camp, I pulled the page or the paper off the grill because I was like, what is this? And I opened it up, and it was one of the Psalms. And I was like, this, what? And it immediately snapped me back into the space of realizing the blessings that I have in my life, and that there was a communication point that didn't really seem possible earlier in the morning. But then once I pulled the Bible, I mean, it was literally a page out of a Bible off my car. I was like,
that's
okay,
crazy.
Yeah, this is crazy. Let's recenter because everything's actually fine.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
I had an experience I'll share. I told you that I have this desire to write these books for military kids, and there's just not a lot written out there for them. And I know that they have a lot of secondary post-traumatic stress, and also just the how do you deal with when your parent is deployed and those kinds of things. And I had gone to a workshop, and I was flying home on the plane. But that morning I had asked God to show me. I said, I need wisdom to know what the next step is for me in terms of, am I supposed to write some other books that are just for people that are adults, or am I supposed to write for kids? And I had asked for wisdom. So I got on the plane next to these two ladies, and I thought I was focused on my work, and all of a sudden I started just having all these ideas for these children's books. And so I was writing one, and it was pink bows and yellow ribbons, and it was all about a little girl that didn't know what yellow ribbons were and how she needed to learn what that was, and learn that there are soldiers that leave and go fight for. And so I was like into this whole thing. So then right at the end of the flight, the ladies began to talk to me, and they hadn't said one word to me the whole time. And so they start talking to me. Before long, the one is saying, the older lady saying, well, we just got back from visiting my daughter, and my daughter is an Iraqi veteran, and she's just really struggling. And she starts telling me her story. She doesn't at this point know I'm a writer. She doesn't know my husband's a veteran, that we've been in military ministry for 20 years, none of that. She just starts sharing her heart with me. And so I said, well, I tentatively said, well, I have written this little children's book. I'm a writer. And so I tell her in a real, just brief moment about Sergeant Willie's Jeep and the story of this little Jeep who'd been tossed aside, and then he got pulled out of a shed one day and repurposed and restored, and that a lot of those kinds of things are the same feelings that little children have sometimes, that they can have a broken heart or feel tossed aside, but God can heal and restore. And I'm telling her this story, and she starts crying. And she leans over to me and she goes, I believe we were destined to meet today. And she's like saying, can I have that book? And I'm like, well, yeah, as soon as I get it published, sure, you can have it. So I'm giving her a card and watching as she walks away. And I was going, you ask God to give you help and wisdom. And then he goes, okay, and he does it in an unexpected way. And you go, all right, I got it. That's exactly what the direction I'm supposed to take. And, sometimes it comes in ways that's very clear like that, and other times not. But when he does, and when you have, like you said, your ear is tuned to him and tuned to people that he brings along your pathway, it's a pretty powerful thing to realize that God is so personal and so real to us.
Well, and how special to have that experience on the plane where I mean, and uncanny that the lady would open up and that the story would be revealed of the similarities between between what you're writing and then what her family's going through. It's just wow.
Right, exactly. Because, the children are so affected. And she said, my 7-year-old grandson is struggling right now. And she wanted something that she could give to him, and you're going, well, how much can a little book about a little Jeep help? But you never know, you never know how something like that can help. At least if someone can start to acknowledge the pain that this little boy might be having, acknowledging it is the first step to healing.
Yeah, because in a very simple way, it says you're not alone, and you're a part of this greater creation, and you're part of the divinity as well. I think it's so easy, especially for little kids, to not feel that connection or feel like everything in their world is gone crazy and they don't understand what's happening. I also love that there's that it seems like there's that jumpstart moment just in the simple act of asking for a little bit of help or a little bit of direction, acknowledging that somehow the person, meaning I know in my own life I've said I need just a little bit of help, even if I can't find the words for what the help would be, because I can't imagine what it is, but I know that I want it, and I understand that something else may be more possible. That feels like the jumpstart moment. And I heard it there when you were saying about kind of asking for that help as you got on the plane and not knowing what that meant, but then just being open to receive it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if there's other jumpstart moments that you, maybe about the book, or if there's a jumpstart moment around your glamper that you want to talk about, because I love the story of that too.
Yeah, there's a little jumpstart moment. Well, my husband and I recently purchased an older camper. I've been on Pinterest way too much and seen these cute little campers that have been restored with painted up, looked like 1950s, red and white, everywhere pretty much. And so we had an opportunity to purchase one. And after we purchased it, I began to think about this camper that had been also sitting in somebody's garage for 30 plus years. Maybe somebody thought that'd never go anywhere again. But then I got to thinking about how someday, and hopefully by spring, my husband and I are going to have this camper restored. We've already started working on it. But I started to think about the book that I wrote on Repurposed Faith, because I've had a lot of people say, well, why did you choose that title, Repurposed Faith? And it just got me to thinking that how some things, like in this case, a camper, was just a thing that had lost its original purpose, and then somebody's going to have a little vision and bring it back to life. And that's really trendy these days. Everybody is repurposing everything, and it's just interesting to watch those TV shows on how somebody can see something that was supposed to be meant for one use, and now they're going to turn it upside down, paint it, and put some basket on it, and now it's something totally different. But it does have some deeper meaning in terms of people that maybe they once had a purpose and then their life changed. Maybe it's through retirement. Maybe it's through a loss of a spouse. Maybe it could be a number of things, health problems. And so they don't have that purpose anymore that they used to have. And I was talking even to an older group the other day, and there were some people up into their 90s in this group. And I said, our purpose may look different from time to time as we transition in our life, but what goes on inside of our heart, in the inner man inside of us, that purpose in our life can remain active and alive and well, and our calling to be receive God's love and mercy and grace, that can be very alive and well, even though we may feel like we don't have anything to offer anyone else, because that's not how God sees us. He sees the purpose and sees the vision. And so the little camper is kind of a symbol of that for my husband and myself. And so we are going to be taking that on a few book signings I see in the future.
I love it. I can't wait to see.
Fill that baby up full of books. We plan to put it on my rosiejwilliams.com website, and it probably is going to be starting up in the spring after the cold weather is over, and take my followers with me on this journey as we repurpose this little camper because I think a lot of people are interested in that kind of thing. I can then kind of make a correlation between what we learned trying to restore the camper and what we've learned in our life when it comes to restoration, when it has to do with our faith.
I love that. It's a beautiful connection because I get the sense, I don't know if you've seen the show Fixer Upper with Chip and Joanna Gaines.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I mean, they're special. Let's just say that. But there's something almost spiritual about the way that they approach an older home, or not an older home, but that they see the bones and the original purpose, and they bring it back to life in a new way. And I think that's why I love HGTV.
I think the bottom line under all of this is that it gives people hope. Because, I mean, it's like if somebody is feeling like they don't have a purpose anymore, or their faith has become lukewarm, but if that's happened and they can see another person's story where they have been able to come out on the other side of that with a renewed hope and with a renewed vision, a renewed purpose, then that's huge, because then that way they can continue to engage in their life in a meaningful way. And my husband was talking this morning about building fires, because he's kind of a firebug, but he was talking about when you build a fire. And he was on a camping trip, and it had rained during the night, and it put the fire out that they'd had the night before, and they were all freezing. Some of them were in sleeping bags, and I don't know. I think they were outside sleeping, and they were just freezing. And he realized that, that fire was out, and that somebody needed to get it going again. Well, they said, well, it might as well be me, because there wasn't anybody else wanting to get out of their sleeping bag to get it going. But he got to talking about how he just flipped over what looked like just wet ashes, and he flipped that over, and he said, I found a coal, and it was like a little glowing coal. And so then he keeps going on that, and pretty soon he finds another one that has just a little bit of a glow to it. And he brought those two coals together, and he began to stoke that fire. And I was sitting there just kind of really fascinated talking about this fire thing, and I think I used one of those examples in the book too, just about he had so many illustrations about how the one coal by itself couldn't start the fire up again, but bringing it with the other coal, maybe they just had a little bit of glow. And we were talking about how important it is that people not isolate, but that they find somebody else that has a little bit of a glow to come closer to, and pretty soon then the synergy of that gets things going, and pretty soon, he's got this fire going again. And the guys started peeking out of their bags, and they'd come over, and they were like all getting warm by the fire. And so he just had so many illustrations about that, and how it is with us, in how many times when we're hurting, the tendency is to withdraw from other people instead of drawing closer to people, to realize how much power there is in relationship and in encouraging one another as we go along.
I love it. Well, because it really is true that lots of times when we feel hurt, or we feel misunderstood, or we feel like maybe our purpose is not clear, then it's it's almost a natural tendency to go inward and wonder what's wrong and what's the problem. But I love the imagery of the two coals. One, it takes somebody I think that's a jumpstart moment of like, okay, it's time to get out of bed, or it's time to flip over the coal to see if there's something to work with here. But then knowing that it just takes a tiny bit, and a little bit of curiosity, and a little bit of love, and gathering together. And then you kind of have the possibility of a much bigger fire, and a community. Right. And I love the fire. It's a a really good. It's a really good image.
My husband, I keep telling him he needs to write an object lesson book. He's like a walking object lesson, but he is a storyteller. I'm a writer. He's a storyteller, and he has amazing stories. Matter of fact, he's contributed to a book called Battlefields and Blessings, Stories of Faith and Courage in the Vietnam War. And he's contributed a couple of stories to that book that talk about the most amazing miracles of him being not being killed, and how in what some said was a God-forsaken country, that God really was there with him and walked him through that. And then you look at the ones that didn't make it. I always go, well, what about them, God? Steve made it through, but what about them? And those are the kinds of questions that, you just hang in the air because you don't know. You have no idea, why some people die sooner than other people. And there's no way that we know the answer to that. But what he does know is that God did not go AWOL over there. He was very much there with him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it takes, like we were saying, being open to receiving some sort of a sign or some sort of, I don't even know, the tiniest little thing can kind of buoy you along in really hard times. And I think that's the part to cling to, or has been for me, is those lights kind of in the darkness. Almost, I know during a very hard time for myself, I actually had a visual of candles floating on the water, and
oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and something that I had meditated on, and very interesting. That has to do with the birth of my son, which was a traumatic event, but there were things throughout it that were very beautiful and very much. I mean, you mentioned earlier that, like, you learn the things in Sunday school, or you learned songs as a child, and there were things that came up through that experience for me that were things that I did learn as a child, but then were renewed and re-brought back to life and used kind of as I went through the experience in ways that then seemed like they were a connection to a higher source and a reminder that I was not forgotten, and that, yes, this was hard in the moment, but that we, meaning my son and I, would both make it through. It was very intense in many ways, but it sounds like you're...
Does sound like a really interesting and meaningful experience there.
Yeah.
For you.
It was, and there's a book in there somewhere. It just needs to shake itself out. I don't know exactly what it is yet.
I used to think that my book was always on the back burner, this book, and now I don't see it that way. I see that it was, it might have been on the back burner, but not that far away all along, because the things that I learned through my life, different things, it was like the puzzle pieces kind of, for me, had to come together proper time. Then I was able to write about it. But I don't want to tell younger people that they have to wait until they're in their 60s like I am to actually write the book, because most of my mentors are my kids' age. They're young, creative people that I love being around because they bring so much energy. I think that is another jumpstart moment for me, now that I'm thinking about it, was to start to go to writers' conferences where there were people like that there, because it jump-started this creative side of me that really had been a little bit dormant for years while I was caregiving for my parents, my husband's parents, and there was a lot of that and a lot of taking care of, getting my own kids grown and off and gone and working and trying to do business and a lot of different things that were there. But to be able to kind of come out of that and then come into a situation where you kind of think, well, maybe I just thought I was going to write a book someday, but then you find out, no, you really were. And so that was a jump start moment for me to to, and I remember I would almost like apologize because I was older than they were, and I was creating a barrier that wasn't even there. And finally, they made me stop talking about it. They said, we don't want to hear about that anymore, because basically they didn't care. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And it kind of set me free to kind of go back to some of the earlier ideas and things that I had, and then feel free to pursue those dreams.
I love that. And I love that you took the step to go to the conference. You know what I mean? Like, you put yourself in the space of, it sounds like, where things could kind of, I don't know, take shape. Or
it was a pretty shaky space, especially that first one I went to, and I stood outside of the door of the conference hall, where there was 300, and they were all buzzing, and a lot of what they were talking about was, the books they'd written, or the different things they'd done, or the social media, that whole thing. And I had, I'm a blogger and I do some things like that, but it's been hard to get up to speed. I feel like I'm running as fast as I can to try to catch up with it. And as soon as I feel like I know what the trend is, it's no, that's old news, and they're on to something else. And so I'm just like running as fast as I can to catch up. But I remember having a conversation with my daughter-in-law that right before I walked into that room, and my mom had passed away recently, and I was pretty insecure about entering into that event. And my daughter-in-law said, Mom, she said, just go in there. She said, those gals need you and you need them. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. So I did. But when I went in, I looked for a table where there was just one lady sitting there. And so I went to sit down at this table, and the lady and I young girl began to talk back and forth. And I said, I have to ask you to bear with me, because I said I'm a little emotional because my mom just passed away 2 weeks ago. And she looked at me and she said, really? She said, when I first came to this conference, my mom had passed away 2 weeks before. And she just reached over and she put her arms around me and gave me a sweet hug. And we kind of had this little moment there of a connection. And then some other ladies came to the table, and it was a beautiful evening. And it was just another example of God's tender, loving care at a time where I needed Him. I needed God with skin on. I needed some person that could, reassure me, because I'm, sitting here. I've done all kinds of things in my work life, my career. I've done a lot of stuff, but then I found myself out of my element there and needing a little extra boost. And right when I needed it, then God brought this sweet lady along to encourage me. And so I think that's kind of an example of those coals we were talking about earlier. And how, just a little glow from one and a little glow from the other, and let's put them together, and let's always encourage each other in our journey.
Yeah. I love that story. Yeah. Because in a vulnerable moment, that is sounds like just what you needed. Well, before we get to the last two questions, is there anything you want to add? I know people can get your book on Amazon. Is that the best place to go for it?
I think so. It's available, probably to order at any local Christian bookstore. Barnes & Noble could order it in. But, at these days, Amazon is pretty handy. I also have a Bible app, under the Bible app, under YouVersion. I have a 10-day Repurposed Faith challenge. And so that's something that, if somebody's not ready to, or doesn't have time to read a book, but they're kind of getting toward the end of this year, and they're kind of beginning to think about goals for next year and things they'd like to change in their life. This is just a 10-day challenge that kind of summarizes, it kind of hits briefly some of the issues that I deal with in the 10 chapters of the book, but a 10-day challenge to kind of get refocused, repurposed, and renewed in your faith. So that's out there to, just if you can go Google the YouVersion or get the Bible app on your phone or your laptop or whatever. So that's out there. And I think that's a nice thing for this time of the year. The other thing that I've found now, I'm a month away out from the book launch, and I'm finding that people that have read the book, some of them have pre-ordered some other copies to give away for gifts at Christmas time. So that's another thing that's to think about too, is the idea that passing on along to others that may be looking for something, maybe struggling, maybe feeling pretty down right now. And my prayer and my hope is that somebody that reads the book could at least maybe identify with one of those chapters where they can kind of go, man, I'm not the only one that struggles with this. One of my chapters deals with attention deficit disorder. Well, being able to say, wow, I'm not the only one that's struggling with this, and here's some ideas, here's some tools that's been helpful. That's what my prayer is, that somebody can find something in the book that will ultimately draw them into a place of peace and joy, as we both have a heart for joy, and to go to the source, just like plugging in your phone, plugging in to spiritual, personal relationship with Christ that is a connection with a God that's not far away and distant, but a God that is loving and really interested in a personal relationship with each one of us, no matter what.
Yes. And I will link up to the book. And yes, it would make a lovely gift. It really is. It's a heartfelt work, and I've enjoyed it as well. So thank you. So let's jump to the last couple questions. I know you talked about balance a little bit, but what does you're a busy lady with your book and redoing your camper and so much going on, and 4 grandchildren. And what does balance look like in your life, and how do you maintain harmony?
One of the things that I've come across is this amazing little iBloom planner that's out there, and that's something that's been really helpful for me. I love it because at the very beginning, you start your planning in the year before. So I'm starting my planning for 2017 now. And the reason that I'm doing that planning is so that my schedule won't rule me, but that I will have a pretty good idea of where I want that schedule to go. Now, obviously, I don't know what's going to happen today or 2017, but this way I have my eyes on a real specific goal. And I try to do it through, practicing what I preach. When I write, if you write a book and you tell people that one of the most important things as a believer in Christ to do is to have time with God, I need to practice what I preach. And so I try to start my day. And if I don't have time in the morning, it doesn't have to be in the morning. But I try to have at least one time during the day that's very quiet and time there to kind of keep my balance and my focus. So, but I say planning, and one of those things then when you talk about planning is priorities, and my family is my number one priority. And so I have some wonderful trips planned that just to see my grandkids in Dallas and to enjoy the ones that are close by here in my hometown. And there's lots of things that just being around children, as we talked about earlier, kind of just gives you a time to just have a little more lighthearted time and a time to just play with them and to get out of the serious adult world and realize that there's a beautiful life out there to live, and I don't want to miss any of it with them.
I love that. And I will link up to the iBloom planner. I have heard of it, so I'm also curious.
Yes.
Let's jump to the last question. Most joyfully, what are 3 ways that you can think of to jumpstart joy in your life, in the world, or in other people's lives?
First thing, you can't give away what you don't have. So I think the first thing is to take care of yourself and to find the joy in your own heart, in the inner person of your heart. So I'd say, first of all, is to take care of yourself that way. The second thing is, and to me, this actually doesn't, if you take care of step number one, step number two is kind of a natural overflow. The scripture talks about the overflow of joy into the lives of other people. And so I'd say number two is let that joy flow out into other people. Then the third thing is I think about not letting all of the negative messages of the world, of the politics, of the Facebook stuff, of the that's negative, put that fire out. Like we were talking about the fire getting put out by the rain. Try to realize that, sometimes you have to move away from toxic people and toxic situations, and in order to maintain your joy. And so I say to not let the negative messages and negative things of the world steal your joy away, because they're going to try to. And that's why we need to have a faith that's always refreshed, repurposed on a consistent, regular basis. Because if we try to just get out there and just exude joy, our tank's going to run dry. So keep the tank filled up, and there's a source to go to for that.
I love it. Thank you so much, Rosie. It's been a total joy to have you on the show. Thank you.
Well, it's been my privilege, and I thank you for asking me, Paula.
Thank you so much, Rosie. I am so glad that we got to connect, and it was a real treat to have you on the show. To get all of the links or find out more about Rosie's book, you can head over to the show notes at jumpstartyourjoy.com/episode 65, and you can get the links to Rosie's site, her Repurposed Faith app, and a link to purchase her book. If you are hooked on podcasts and you are thinking of starting your own, you can enroll in my other free e-course, which is called Podcasting Fundamentals, on my website. It will give you all the insights on why podcasting is a great fit for your business or blog, and you can get to this by accessing the drop-down link of classes and courses from the top nav. When we come back next week, I've got Connie Curtis coming on to talk about how to enjoy the holidays if you are gluten-free or have a friend or family member who is gluten-free. We share it all so that you guys can have a great gluten-free holiday season. And there will be some recipes included. I hope that you'll come back for that. And until then, I hope that your days are filled with so much joy.